you have seen this type of makeup palette floating around on your feed and maybe thought that it had a bit too much coverage, I'm going to show you how to use a similar setup and get the no makeup look of your dreams. I'm breaking down my fusion method with my customizable palette and a tinted serum. Check it out. If your desired makeup application is to look completely natural and undetectable, this application is exactly what you need to know and understand. Now, this isn't going to come down to just the products that you're using. You have to look at your face a little bit differently. This will work for absolutely any age, but it is superior for women in the mature skin category. So let's look at our face by dividing it into two different zones. I call this application the fusion method. And while there's no new makeup applications out there, what I'm really doing with this is updating the methods, the education, and the products that can be used and where they should be placed. This combination and updated methods is really how you at home can achieve an undetectable makeup application that really looks like you just came straight from a facial. Let's go ahead and get started. A lot of us out there can use sunless tanner. I unfortunately cannot. My skin has a lot of hyperpigmentation and melasma that I'm constantly battling with different lasers and products. So the best way to actually add a little bit of color, like somebody would with sunless tanner, before I begin my makeup application is to use this product by Undone Beauty. This is their water bronzer stick, and I'm going to use the color Baked. So when we have a little bit of color added to our skin before we actually start applying any makeup product, what happens is it gives us a good, I don't want to say a base because there's no product that's like left that's detectable on your face. So this isn't a base, it's really just an enhancement of tone. And this allows us to use less product overall. So this product is, just like it says, it's a very watery substance. That's the only way I really know how to describe it. And you don't have to be good at makeup to apply it. It just gives us a good starting point of color so that we use less product overall. It's very forgiving. There is, I believe, a few different colors in this water bronzer. Like I said before, this is the color Baked. I haven't used any of the other colors, so I don't know exactly what their undertones and what they would look like, but go ahead and give them a try. I don't really feel like you could go super wrong. Just like what would happen if we used a sunless tanner without enhancing any of our melasma or hyperpigmentation or age spots that just happens as we get older. The water bronzer washes off at night with your skincare, so it does have to be applied daily. And I do think that's why it doesn't enhance any hyperpigmentation. And if you can use a sunless tanner, use that. I think that's fantastic. I just can't. Now that that is done, completely dried, and I can move on to the next part of this application, it's really about looking at your face in two different zones. So we have the high moving muscle zone and the low moving muscle zone. And what I mean by that is how much muscle moves in that area. And if we're looking at our face that way, we can better decide what products to put there. In a low moving muscle zone, it's going to be the areas of our face that just don't get a lot of creasing or a lot of movement. I get a little bit of dysport, so I don't have a ton of really deep creases on my forehead, but I still can move around my eyes and my nose, like all that area, so that I still have fine lines and wrinkles in those areas. But back here, there's not a lot of creasing and there's not a lot of texture. Pretty much going to be the same way on your face as well. Age and other factors can play into that, but that's why you are going to be looking at your own skin and your own face at home to decide what's a low moving muscle area. And in a low moving muscle area, we can use products of high opacity, like concealer, like foundation, skin tints, anything, BB creams, anything that has higher opacity opacity can be used within these areas. We just don't want to use those products in high moving muscle areas, which we'll get to next. And that's the secret sauce to having under eyes that do not crease. So stay tuned for that. Let's talk more about the low moving areas. So if I'm looking at this in the back, like sort of the back part of my face, that's going to be the lower area. If I were to be using a foundation, I personally would spot treat in this area. I don't really like foundation and I don't really feel the need to use it, especially if I put on this water bronzer before, but I do want to add a little bit more depth and enhancement to my skin and my face because I am in my 40s and things have dropped a little bit. So I want to lift and enhance to bring that focus into looking a little bit more younger and youthful. So in my compact here, this is a foundation, this is a bronzer, and bronzers in this type of application are a little bit more opacity. They're not full, but they're a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is take my bronzer here and load it up on my brush and just add a little bit more depth to the areas of my face that would get sun-kissed if I was just on a wonderful tropical vacation and just had a little bit more color to my skin. So the high points of my face are really going to be what I do in this area. So when I'm talking about foundation, so if you needed to spot treat or you had areas that you wanted to, you could add your foundation all over, or you could just do, like I said, a little bit more into that spot treating zone. When I talk about opacity and I talk about high or low opacity, what I want you to think about is a cake. And if we think about frosting a cake, if I were to put frosting on that cake, it's full opacity, like your foundations, like your BB creams, things like that. What would happen is we can't see that cake beneath it, right? You can't see the top of that cake. So it's completely frosted, nothing gets through. Same thing on your skin. It's completely frosted, nothing gets through. But if we glazed that cake, we would have less opacity, meaning we could still see the surface of the cake, but we now blurred it, we now balanced it, and we made it look a little bit more appealing, a little bit more appetizing. So that's the way to think about your makeup, kind of like ingredients when we're working on our face. So the low moving areas can have higher opacity. They can have frosting. But if we're in the high moving areas, no frosting is allowed. They need to be sheer, it needs to be glazed, it needs to be demi. So we'll get into that. So moving on to the next part of my face, I would be using a contour to just add a little bit of lift. I'm not going for Kim K here at all. I just want my skin to look youthful and I want it to look a little bit more defined, that my cheekbones are lifted and I have a little bit more fullness to my face that probably isn't there because I'm aging. Putting in a little bit of contour into this area, and what I should do is move my hair out of my face here. So you can see that I got just a subtle shadow and a little bit of lift, which I don't have here. So I'm gonna do the same thing on this side. And you don't have to be scared of contour because you don't have to look like Kim K. You don't have to snatch your face out unless you want to. If you wanna do that, that's absolutely fine. But this look that I'm going for with my fusion method is a very undetectable makeup application. I want to leave you questioning in person, does she or doesn't she have makeup on? The goal, I'm not doing any smoke and mirrors here. There's no editing to these videos. So what you are seeing on camera is what I'm going to look like in person. I don't have fancy lights going on. I have good lighting in my house, but I'm not using fancy lights to make this look any different. That's how you're going to achieve the exact same thing at home. So now what I'm doing here is adding again a little bit of my contour. I don't drop my compact. Along my hairline here. So I'm just bringing in that focus to the center of my face. That's how this is going to end up here. So using just a little bit of that contour and going around and filling in some areas where color is missing and where I want to define my jawline, my cheekbones, and all of that, just to lift and look more structured, more youthful. I'm gonna wipe off my brush here. And the last thing we're going to do in our low moving muscle area is to add a little bit of color. So I prefer a cream product for blushes. I believe they look more youthful and plumping on mature skin, and even on young skin. I think they just look fresh and healthy. They just have that glow. So I'm going to use my cream blush, and I'm going to put it right on this area. So if you take an L, sorry, I'm doing this backwards. So if I take an L right here, it gives you the perfect placement of where your blush should be. So I kind of plop that color down, and then I will blend it out, and I'll finish this up in the end. I have the type of skin that the more I touch it, the pinker it's going to get. So I will put this on, and then I'll kind of mess with it a little bit more at the end after my skin settles down a bit. You can see it just gets a little bit pink here. Okay, so focusing on our high moving muscle areas, I want you to look at your face a little bit differently. When we're thinking about high moving muscles, that's where we have the most creasing, the fine lines, the textures. Those areas are going to be what we would include in that high moving area. So typically for the majority of us, it's going to be around our eyes. It could be the middle of our forehead and this muzzle area of our face. I prefer to call it the panda bear because it just seems cuter than a muzzle, but the truth is that's what it's called. So when we have like our nasal labia folds, we might have what people call smoker lines around our mouth, and then just our eyes in general. We're going to use products in this area of low opacity. My favorite are Demi colors. There's a ton to choose from, and I can help you get a color match to know what's the best for you. I will have that down in my post of this video, which is a free color consultation. But the Demi colors are superior in my opinion. I've messed with a few other products to try out, but the color options with this and the low opacity is what makes this product the updated type of product you need to use for this fusion method application. So what I'm going to do is focus on under eyes with these colors, and they are going to be skin on its best day finish. So we're not going for the concealer look for this because concealer is going to crease in texture. I do not care how good you are at powdering, priming, and puffing, whatever that might be. It is not going to work in this area, especially if you're mature, because of your anatomy. And let's take a little science break in this for a minute. So the muscle around your eye is called the orbicularis oculi. You can look it up. And in the medical field, it's referred to as the sphincter muscle of the eyelids because a sphincter moves circumventually, which is exactly how your eye muscle moves. And as we age, in correlation to the thinning skin around your eyes, that muscle tends to create creases and textures that are impossible for it not to texture and settle into the fine lines when we use a product that has full opacity, i.e. a concealer. So if you want to have the most youthful, fresh looking eyes that you can have, then you need to use a product of less opacity. Cue my Demi color. So I'm going to pull out my brush for this. Oh, here it is. I'm gonna pull out my brush for this, and I'm gonna make sure that it's wiped off and cleaned. The easiest way to apply these Demi colors is to look at your under eye as almost like a paint by number situation. So I wanna start with the darkest area of my under eye first. Now I realize that my darkness might not be as dark as your darkness, but it doesn't matter. The application for this is the same. You'll use different colors, which I'll help you pick, but the application is the same. So let's start with the darkest color first, and I'm going to use my deepest saturation for that. So I'm not really gonna say exactly what colors I'm using because it's not really gonna matter, especially when I help color match you for your colors. So I'm gonna go to the darkest point first, which for me is this inner corner and this part right here. So I'm gonna take that away. I'm going to delete that, and then I'm gonna work down. And I'll use words like delete and filter because those are the best terms to use when we are working on this fusion method and to get your skin on its best day. And this will be completely undetectable when finished, and it won't crease or texture. So I'm gonna work on those little spots first. And also take note, I am not using primers or powders to do this for my under eyes. Those type of products are going to settle and they're going to increase the probability of you actually having creasing and texture because we're adding layers, and I don't want any layers. Aside from eye cream that I put on earlier before I started my makeup, that's it. Now that I've deleted the darkest points, I'm going to move down in saturation. So I'm going to wipe off my brush and I'm going to the next level of darkness. So that happens to be right here underneath that. And there's a little tiny point of it right here as well. So I'll move on to that on both eyes, which are very, very similar for me. Sometimes they'll change a little bit depending on lack of sleep or stress, but for the most part, they stay pretty similar. And then I want to get rid of what I call the water trough, or I think its technical term is the malar groove. One of my viewers told me that, so thank you, shout out to her. Malar groove or tear trough. And I'm going to stay within that color to color. We're deleting shadows and excess color. We're not doing an all over application, and that's the key to this. If you want those youthful glowing under eyes that just look like skin on its best day, no detectable product whatsoever. Okay, so I'm gonna delete that part of it. And a lot of women have some hyperpigmentation in the outer corner. I'm going to take care of that as well since I'm working on my eyes. There are a few little spots of like hyperpigmentation that tend to like poke through. So I will go through and just lightly tap those and delete them. A hero color that I almost put in almost everybody's palette is the 03 because it really does work for almost anybody. And it's just a hero color where it can take care of a lot of hyperpigmentation and spots as needed. Okay, so now that I have the majority of my under eye done, and I've worked kind of around my face, I do want to balance out this muzzle area so that I can feel a little bit more put together and a little bit more elevated. There are two ways to do this. One, you can work with spot treating inside of your compact that has your highlight, or also known as a foundation, and you can be very precise with spot treating. I don't like products in this area that have that much opacity. I find that they crease in texture. So what I like to use is a tinted serum. I like a serum over a skin tint because a skin tint still has too much opacity for me. A serum is kind of the fusion of a skin tint and a serum. So it's like skincare. So it's lighter, it's less opacity, and it's just a lot more fluid in movement, where it's just kind of blurring and balancing and not adding any texture. So all I like to do is a dot right on my nose and on this upper lip area. That's like it. And in fact, I think that was too much product for me. You'll have to mess around to find the right amount for yourself. I want to balance my nose out, and noses have a lot of pores, which means they have a lot of texture. And if you put a product of opacity like foundation on there, it is going to enhance that texture. It's going to enhance those pores, and it'll draw more attention to it. So that was too much product for me right here. So I'm gonna use this hand that doesn't have any product onto it. But I like to put the tinted serum in this area because it's lighter and it just doesn't typically show that sort of texture and settle into those lines. It just gives more of a blurring effect that I'm going for. Now, depending on you, you can use more or less. I try to use less anytime I'm doing my makeup. The less, the better. So I like to get that on there and let it completely dry. And then I'm gonna pull out my water bronzer again, that same Undone Beauty. And I'm going to, I don't wanna add opacity to this area because it would be like adding frosting, which is going to show texture. It's going to settle. So I'm gonna put a little bit of that on the bridge of my nose just to add kind of that sun-kissed beauty effect. It just always looks younger and more youthful, and anytime you can add healthy color and healthy glow, we're just going to look better. I am going to take just a little bit of my contour. I'm gonna wipe off my brush here, and I'm gonna do just a little bit of my contour to add some sculpting to my nose so that it just looks a little bit smaller and more straight. I'm not a huge fan of my nose. I do wanna get a nose job eventually. One day. So I'm just gonna add a little bit of sculpting to it. This is totally optional and not something you have to do at all. You could just leave it as is, but I just want to add a little bit of sculpting so that it does seem a little bit straighter and a little bit smaller. That's just my personal preference, but you do you in this application. But again, I don't wanna have detectable makeup. I just want to add kind of the shadow to this situation so that it's not very detectable at all. I don't want it to be noticeable from any angle. I just want to add a little bit more structure. So moving on with that same, I'm going to use my contours and I'm going to add a little bit of dimension to my lips so that they also look a little bit bigger and a little bit fuller, kind of the opposite of my nose. But that's the magic of makeup, that you can do that with the same products kind of in a different application in order to get a different outcome. So I do my lips this way. I don't like outline them on the outside of it. I just think for me that ends up making them look like dirty later in the day. I just like to fill in where color's missing, like that natural shadowing of my own coloring on my lips. And then I can just reapply my gloss throughout the day, and I don't touch my lips up with this type of sculpting. Finishing off that aspect, and then I will take a little bit of my VR1 and kind of highlight the top Cupid's bow of my lip, just so I get that fuller sort of pout with it as well. And I'll kind of just blend that out a little bit more, but that just gives me a little bit of a glow right there. I'll use that VR1 on my inner corner of my eyes because it's always a little bit dull and yellow in there. This way I just get that natural glow without any illuminators or glitters or shimmers. Like, that's just not my style with it. I will wipe that off again and use a little bit of corrector down on the bottom part of my nose where I have some broken capillaries, and a little bit of a pimple that was right here. So I'll take care of that. And then going back through just to balance out a few spots. So if I take away a few of these things that are a distraction, the rest of my skin's going to just look like it's straight from a facial. It's healthy, it's glowy, no detectable finish on there. Just hit a few things that are a bit of a distraction, that if they're gone, then they'll just kind of balance out everything else. Once I've worked around my face and I have finished balancing out anything that has bothered me, I usually just top off with my favorite lip gloss and I'm good to go. This type of application, when you are thinking about the different zones on your face and the different products that you can use in them, will be the key to getting you a very, very natural finished product that's just that glow, and kind of questioning, she just has amazing skin. But really, I don't. I did a lot of it with product, but it's just undetectable. You just can't see it and you won't see it in person. So I'll even get up close in the camera here and I'll move and you can't see texture to my skin at all, because it's about using the right type of product in the right zone of your face. And this is so easy to do. You just have to pay attention to your own personal skin at home. Pay attention to your own muscles and your own face in order to do this with the right kind of products. So if you want to get a customized fusion method palette like this, which is a fusion of 2 different makeup products from the same brand. This is Seint products. So I have 3D creams and I have Demi colors in here in order to make up this type of application. So if you want that color match, it's free, it's linked below. I usually include eyeshadows in your compact as well, because you know, there's always days you want to elevate. These are a couple of my favorites. And I always use the Black Friday under my lashes here, just to make them look a little bit fuller and bring a little bit more depth to that lash line, because I'm not really doing a lot with lash strips or lash extensions anymore. I like it to be very natural, but this pairs beautifully with strips or extensions. So, all right, thanks again for hanging out. If you have any questions about this fusion method application and any other way I can help you to achieve this style of application, comment below, let me know what they are. I'm more than happy to help. I'm always there in my comments for you guys. So join me again, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.